what is Atlas Fellowship?
The probability of war between US and China in the next 100 years. Get a line between you just being expert in a subject or you having the insider information. Fuck around and find out rule again. That's all you have, especially if you're not from the United States. You do not have the information you need in order to make the right decisions.
What's good, everyone? Welcome on PredictTime podcast. And right now, we are gonna skip all the boring intros and start straight from the question. Arseny, you are 20 years old, and right now you are studying in one of the most crazy universities that are possible in this world. And at your age, you raised $2.5 million from product that is actually being built on Polymarket, even though the Polymarket itself didn't understand what were they cooking back in the day. And so could you explain how this came possible and what are you doing right now?
That is quite a lot of questions, my friend, but let me get started from the very beginning of it. So it's 2023. I'm moving to San Francisco from Russia to study at Minerva University, the one you've mentioned, which is in fact a pretty interesting college, but we'll get to that a bit later. I arrived to Berkeley, and the first crowd I meet there is rationalists and effective altruists from the Bay who've been thinking about prediction markets in more of utilitarian manner. So how do we base our decision making on different outcomes, which you can see on prediction markets? And I found all of that pretty interesting. I started getting deeper and trying different apps. So for instance, I was playing with an app called Manifold, which is a play money app, legal in the United States, but similar concept around prediction markets. What was fun about that is that you could spin up markets on your friends permissionlessly. So for instance, my friends spun up a market on whether I'm gonna go on a date by the end of summer, which did not resolve positively, but it was a fun experience to have. And I think from my personal side, I got into prediction markets in two different directions. So the first one was more of, again, utility-based, where you can actually see some useful information like forecasts on elections consolidated by the power of markets, right? But on the other hand, it was those funny markets people spun up. One time I went to an event called Bet on Love, which was a dating show with 10 dudes on a stage and also a girl named Ayla, who was choosing one of the contestants to date based on different competitions they were participating in. And that's, I guess, a pretty common show in America. But the tricky part was that every contestant had a prediction market opened on them, and people in the audience were betting on who's going to eventually get the girl's heart and some other related questions. So I made like 10,000 mana on that one overnight, which was quite a lot of mana. And I think that was one of the moments when I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Like, you can just use your edge in whatever way your edge is in order to make profits, whether it's play money or like real currency. And yeah, started getting deeper into that.
So would you say that you got into prediction market topic organically? So you were the part of a community who were actually putting bets and, you know, being active in the ecosystem, and then you became a founder?
Yeah, 100%. So to be completely fair, at the same time as I was studying at Minerva, I was also going through this program called Atlas Fellowship, which is also a program around rationalism with a lot of, I guess, intellectual ideas, specifically around efficient markets in general, but prediction markets as well, because they are pretty efficient ways of crowdsourcing the information, right?
I think I will go to this fellowship a little bit later. And for now, what I wanted to actually ask you is about your college, because you got over 17 rejections before you got applied, actually. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what is Minerva University, why you actually chose this exact university, and why is it that crazy how people call it usually?
100%. Yeah. So I guess just to go back a little bit, it was 2022. I moved to Kazakhstan and lived there for a year or so, basically just applying to different universities. I did not
Okay.
really plan to stay in Kazakhstan long term, and I thought that United States might be a good shot. I did not know at the time that US is actually a good fit for myself because I just did not have enough data points on what's going on in the States. But I kind of had that impression that it would
So
be
you
cool
never
to.
had this American dream, so-called, right?
I don't think I had enough context of America. Like, I learned what Silicon Valley is when I was 16 or so. I only went on Twitter after I moved to the United States. And
Okay,
like
I
getting
see.
all
So
of those like points, dots on the map connected was quite difficult actually.
okay. So your brain was not fogged with this American dream yet, right?
Nah. I just
That
had some initial impression that America might be something where I'll find where I truly belong, right? And yeah,
So
I just
about the
moved with that.
university itself,
Yeah,
because you mentioned I've been like when I was researching you and just reading your past and who you actually are, I touched the topic of university a couple of times. And could you just briefly describe to the viewers today why Minerva University is so interesting? And as I already said, why is it that crazy?
right, 100%. So for Minerva, that is actually a college which is completely different from the rest of the ones I applied to in the States. Most of the colleges have a campus, which is based somewhere either in the city or maybe outside in the suburbs. And people spend 4 years going to the same place, studying the same subjects, quite regular traditional education. Minerva was established in around 2010 or so by its founder, Ben Nelson, who started it as a startup in order to basically reimagine how higher education is done. And he had two ideas at its core. The first one being that it's not efficient to stay at one place for 4 years straight. And given how globalized the whole world becomes, it makes much more sense to move students around. So every cohort at Minerva changes their country of study every half a year. At least that's
Every half a year. Okay.
yes.
And so,
That
but
was the
what you
case.
said that you moved to the U.S. So back at the time where you were applying and where you were like when you got your studies started, it was in San Fran, right?
That's right. Yes. So Minerva
Okay.
rotation starts in San Francisco, and then it goes all across the globe. I think the next
Okay.
rotation city is Taipei, then it's Seoul, Hyderabad in India, Berlin, Buenos Aires, all kind of different cities. And the idea is to get people a different perspective on what's possible after graduation, which I think is a pretty reasonable concept. It has pros and cons. The cons, namely, being not like you don't really have the ability to compound whatever you're doing in the city because you have to move to a different place in 6 months, right? So if you're, say, trying to build a startup or figuring out what to do with your career, whatever it is, then yeah, like you just have to start from scratch every half a year. But on the positive side, you'll travel around, you'll get more experience, and maybe you'll get a better understanding of what you want to do in the first place. And then, so the other thing about Minerva, which is completely different from the traditional colleges, is its active learning framework, as it's called, meaning basically that the classes are not lectures and the assignments are not tests. Every class at
Okay.
Minerva is
So
conducted.
it's all being based on workshops, right?
Essentially, yeah, something like that. So every class at Minerva is conducted as an online call with around like 20 students and a professor. And professor basically calls everybody every 5 minutes or so. So throughout the class, you'll have to contribute to the discussion at least like 3 or 4 times. And the idea here being that you have to keep your brain constantly engaged in order to actually get the material like sorted inside it, right? But while listening
So
to
like all
lectures passively
all
is
the
not
Gen
useful.
Z guys who are constantly saying that, oh, I have ADHD, I cannot focus, I cannot do anything. It's especially for them to stay focused through the entire period of your class, right?
Sorta, though, because you're sitting in front of your computer, in fact, many people are just multitasking with a bunch of other stuff, like applying to internships or chatting, which is no good. And Minerva tries to figure out how to deal with that. But yeah, in some sort, it is more engaging. So yeah, those two, I guess, are the main criteria which differentiate Minerva. I, however, did not go through any of the rotations. I arrived to San Francisco, requested to stay there because I saw that there's something I'm onto with regards to the products I was building. And then, yeah, ended up working on Gondor.
Super cool, super cool. And the fact that you actually stayed in San Fran shows a little bit more about your founder potential and that you decided to stay there. And so my first thing when I talk to people from San Francisco is to ask how you genuinely feel in this city. So when you firstly arrived to San Francisco, what was your first thought? Is it actually true that everyone is a startup founder there and that you actually being surrounded by founders 24/7 and even taxi driver who gets you to the place is the founder? So what was your first impression when you actually got there?
Right, right. So I think the process of onboarding to San Francisco is very different depending on what career you had in the past or what kind of
I
experiences
love
you've
how
had.
you said get onboarded to San Francisco.
Yeah, I know.
This is actually true.
Because it is onboarding. It's a lot of very niche cultural moments you gotta know in order to understand all the concept. But for most people, especially if you were terminally online on Twitter, as I became after I moved there, if you were terminally online before coming to SF, you'd actually be very familiar with all the stuff going on there. And I don't think that this learning curve would be too steep. For me, because I came from a completely different background, like I was planning to do physics at college when I was back in Russia. And I just did not know all of those, I guess, complexities or different pathways people could take. I was fascinated. Like, I spoke to any person who claimed that they are a founder, and I'm like, oh, crap.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Okay.
that is impressive. But, like, slowly you start to distinguish and you understand that some crowds are different than the others. Some people are, in fact, building something interesting, but others are just grifters. And yeah, it takes time to build out that intuition. But I think in general, with regards to SF, I had highs and lows in a sense that I liked the city a lot at some point. As of right now, I think that the whole place is a little bit of a bubble. Back to what you said, most of the people in San Francisco are actually not involved in startups whatsoever, right? They're just regular
Okay.
workers. Yeah, if you just look at the data, there's a very small percentage of people who's involved in startups. It's a little bit larger than in the other cities you take, but still, it's not the majority. However, the city itself behaves as if the startups are everywhere. I think the most obvious example would be ads. You can look it up. There's so many of weird billboards you would never see anywhere else. Like, I don't know, stop hiring humans and get our AI agent instead. Stuff like that. And imagine what percent of the people who are walking by that billboard would actually convert to that ad. I think it would be nothing that would justify the cost of the ad from the first place. But because what I think is most important about San Francisco is because it's the city of signaling, in a sense. You always try to signal that you're hot as a product or you're hot as a founder in order to get more opportunities open for you. You have to. Because of that, people are putting up those billboards targeted at a very small niche group of people, and not even in order to buy their product, but in order to invest in their next round or share it on Twitter or whatever. So I think because of that very complicated network of incentives, which are actually created by the VC money from the first place. So VCs are the ones deciding the rules of the game, essentially deciding who to invest into. Because of that, it's pretty complicated to figure out who's genuine and who's not at the first glance, but then eventually it all gets pretty obvious.
Okay. And what was the weirdest thing that you faced in Bay Area? Like, what was as for the guy who came from CIS and who didn't have any background related to San Francisco and to America in general, like what was the strangest part of it that actually made you say, what the hell? So
It's a good question. I don't think there was anything specific really. Like I kind of liked the place I was at, and it was very natural for me to be there. I think more natural than when I was back in Russia. The ideas around me were very much aligned with what I was thinking about the world. If you want some crazy stories, I think that the craziest ones would come from rationalists. So in Berkeley, there's this thing called polycules, where it's basically communities of people who are all dating each other instead of like being monogamous or in any other traditional sense. And there's lots of drama involved within those polycules because it's a very small community and everybody knows each other, but at the same time, because there's no boundaries, people are getting in all kind of weird situations. I myself have not been into the polycule, but I had a few friends who were involved in the community, I'd say.
Okay.
And yeah, they told me some interesting stories I would not be sharing on camera, but that's probably like one of the craziest types of community I've seen in the Bay Area.
And what about, because people say that it's impossible to find a girlfriend there. Is it actually true that all the girls are geeks and it's impossible to get your, love of your heart till the end of your life in there?
Well, here I can't relate. I found my girlfriend in San Francisco, but to be fair, she only came there for a quick visit. So
okay.
I never really explored the local dating scene, as I'd say. However, the ratios are crazy. So if you host like a party, especially like a tech-focused party, you'd usually get like 10 to 1 men to women. And there isn't really anything you can do with it. You just figure things out.
Yeah, you just accept that it's almost always a sausage party and nothing besides that.
Well, fair enough.
All right, cool. Let's come back to business topic. And what I actually wanted to start from is your first startup. So while you were just at the beginning of your studies, you founded your first product. So can you just briefly describe what was it and how you actually got this thing in your mind that I want to be a founder, I want to do something, and I have the idea that I want to share with some people?
Sure. So when I arrived to SF, I quickly started going to different events because I was motivated by this fuck around and find out rule where I basically just have to get more context and I don't know what I don't know. So I went to all kind of different parties and I started hosting mine as well. I hosted a hackathon for students at my university, which was held at a mansion in around Stanford with a pool and like night parties, which was pretty fun. But it was a real hackathon, 48 hours long. And after I tried doing stuff like that, I realized that it's very difficult to understand where you can host events. And especially if you're new to the city, you don't really know the local scene. So I created this directory essentially for different venues around the Bay where you could host the event. You could reach out to the people who are running the venue and then request them for quote and stuff like that, which was called Gatsby. For the book. Yeah. But
very loud name, not gonna lie.
In fact.
Did you think of Great Gatsby while making it?
I don't know. I just like naming things after the book characters, as you can see. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But I don't think that I was too interested in the problem itself. I was rather just playing and trying to build things. But I quickly realized that, first of all, that problem I'm targeting does not scale, right? It's a very niche market. People are not really willing to pay for whatever solution you build for them. And then secondly, I just do not really care. It was a problem I saw, and I realized that a solution would be helpful, but I just did not resonate with it much, and I discontinued the project.
Okay, but I think one of the most crucial things here that I wanted to ask you is about mixing it together with the studies. So how did it look for you while having, full-time studies and also starting your own startup? So how did you find time for it, and what was, the biggest teaching that you learned when it comes to time management and, generally make it work?
Well, man, what I can tell you is that I'm probably the worst person to give advice on time management. My schedule is a mess. I'm just doing things till they're done, which is probably not the most efficient way to get the work ready.
I mean, you're getting the things done, and this is the most important thing.
Well, yeah, but it could be improved further. However, I think with regards to the studies, when I first arrived, I continued the path I had when I was back at high school. I got straight A's. I was focused on the studies themselves, trying to figure out what's actually useful in them. But then I quickly realized that those concepts that are being given to me and the amount of time I'm spending on them is just not justified. Like, the ROI was relatively low. It was not zero, but I had plenty of other things to play with, which I thought would be more useful. And yeah, I was just getting the pieces of the puzzle together, and I think that this process of experimenting with different projects helped me much more than college. So I just started deprioritizing the studies, to be quite honest. I went on with building things and seeing how they work. I started playing with Polymarket more actively as well, and so that there's some potential in there. And yeah, I think I'm just trying to allocate my time to whatever I think the highest ROI priority right now is, instead of trying to capture everything.
Oh, that's a super cool phrase that you just said, that you were prioritizing your time according to the ROI that you were getting from it. And it's a super cool thing. And you already touched the Polymarket topic. So before we move on to Polymarket topic, you already mentioned Atlas Fellowship. So can you describe what is Atlas Fellowship and how did it actually change your real life perspective? So not something theoretical, but how it actually helped you with your journey.
Right. So Atlas was the program for people who think differently about the world, I'd say.
Okay.
The selection process for it was pretty interesting. It had like 4 stages or so, and I had to solve all kind of different puzzles. Some of them are kind of related to prediction markets. So for instance, one of those was that I had to forecast the probability of war between US and China in the next 100 years. And I was like 16 at that at the time. But I managed to get it done. I do not remember what estimate I gave, but I think the whole tone for the fellowship was that you want to understand how to quantify the unquantifiable things. So for instance, the Bible of this rationalist movement is the Bayes theorem, basically a way to update your priors, as it's called. When you have new information coming in the system, you reconsider your previous beliefs and you self-correct in a sense of how much you believe in a specific topic, or what's the probability of an outcome you see potentially happening. And we were studying math and different, I guess, finance subjects as well around this idea of modeling the reality and understanding how to quantify different things. And yeah, as you see, prediction markets fell very naturally into that.
Okay. And so still pushing on the question that I just asked you, like how it actually reflected on your journey. So maybe you can just sum it up with a single phrase that, this fellowship gave me XYZ, so I went there. Maybe somehow like that.
Sure. I guess it just got me interested in prediction markets from the first place. Like the first trade I placed on Manifold was during Atlas. And
Oh
then
wow. Okay.
yeah, and then I just kept going in the same direction because I already had that initial piece of the puzzle. If I did not go to the Atlas Fellowship, I wouldn't have known that prediction markets exist from the first place. So somebody should had to tell me, and then I figured out the rest.
So was your first touch of Polymarket during this Atlas Fellowship actually, or was it even before that? So my question is just like when you generally touched Polymarket for the first time.
Polymarket specifically, I think it was a little bit later. So I started with Manifold because the onboarding process was much smoother. You do not have to deposit crypto or whatever. You just trade fake coins. And then at some point, I was just like, okay, I mean, I am interested. I want to try it out with higher stakes. And yeah, I went to Poly, I think it was prior to the US elections, and there were a bunch of markets related to them, and mentioned markets were getting pretty popular. So one of the first trades I made was actually on whether Kamala is going to say coconut during one of her speeches pre-rally, which I almost lost as that meme about coconut tree was getting bigger and people thought that she will in fact say it, but I managed to hold through.
All right, that's cool. So like I can already say that you were not just observing, but you were actively trading yourself, which actually makes you a trader. So you learned the kitchen from the inside. And so may I ask you, like people love to hear about financials, and I also love to ask financial questions. So what was the biggest profit from a single trade that you made before you actually started your own project on top of Polymarket?
Right. I think I did not really make so much, to be quite fair, because first of all, I was just a college student and I was very cautious with the money I'm putting in. And then I think the culture I had back from Russia made me very cautious and risk averse with regards to spending the money. So probably it was like $1,000 or so as one of the good trades I've made, which were actually based on the research and rationality I applied. Not really much. I did a bunch of smaller trades to backtest the strategies and everything, but yeah, I am definitely not the largest Polymarket trader.
And can you say that you were actually making a living with Polymarket back in the days, or was it, something just for fun?
No, it was more like pocket money, to be fair. Like I was running a bunch of strategies, especially the ones focused on bonding. So there's this idea where you can allocate to a market that is already predetermined in a sense, like trading at 99% or so. And that market resolves in a few days or maybe a week from now. So you just lock your money there for a little bit. Maybe some people would fill your position because they've been holding it for a much longer time. They got like 2x, 3x on that. So they don't care about the remaining 1%. They're just willing to resell it to you. And you just hold for the remaining week or so, right? So I was doing that. And I was automating it with some pretty simple scripts back in the day, but I never really deployed too much capital in that strategy specifically. First of all, because I did not have capital, and then, yeah, I think I was more like exploring and understanding how I can make it out.
Okay. That's a very wide answer, and thank you for actually giving us more details on how it looked for you. But let's kick in with the founder's journey. I want to see this transition from just being a student who suddenly moved from CIS to the US and started to touch the things to becoming the founder who got 2.5 mil of investments just at 20 years old. So what I wanted to ask at first is, what did you see in Polymarket that other traders didn't, and explain it as business idea, not as technical thing?
Sure. So when I was playing with the Polymarket's API for some of the strategies I was testing, I found out that the tokens people trade, the shares, are actually on-chain assets. And you can just do whatever you'd like with them outside of Polymarket. And I tried withdrawing those shares and seeing them popping up on my wallet, and I was like, okay, pretty cool. That's like a real on-chain asset, which I can just move around. I can send it to my friend without Polymarket being involved.
So for those who are not in context, can you explain in simple words how this mechanism works?
Sure. So every share you trade on Polymarket is actually a token on-chain, which guarantees that you get $1 per every share if you are on the winning side, and the token itself becomes worthless if you're on the losing side, so you don't get any payout. And I figured out that those shares or tokens can be withdrawn and stored on any wallet you have without Polymarket getting involved in it. And they remain valuable because they're backed by stable coins locked within Polymarket. We'll not get into too much details.
Okay.
The cool part about that is that you're able to draw analogies from what you've seen in crypto with typical assets like Solana or Ethereum and see where the prediction markets are heading. Because if those shares are becoming more and more popular, then people would want to compose them in different primitives, as it happened with crypto. And if you look at the activity within crypto space, the biggest protocols out there are all in DeFi lending business, right? So you have Aave, which is currently sitting at 35 billion TVL deposits, or you have Morpho, which is sitting at 5 or 6 billion. And you quickly understand that there's some direction which you can take by letting people borrow against Polymarket positions the same way how they borrow against their crypto coins.
So you saw this opportunity that there is nothing where you can borrow against your Polymarket position. So like explaining it in business idea, how I asked you at the beginning, like which sort of business idea clicked in your mind that you actually understood, all right, this thing definitely gonna work. I'm going for it.
You remember about that bonding strategy I was telling you about? The problem, like the reason why those markets were inefficient is because people wanted to get out of the market. People were like, okay, I've earned 2x or 3x on that one. I'm done here. Even though they could have gotten like this extra little 1 or 2% if they just held through the resolution. And the reason why they want to get out is because they need more liquidity. They want to move on. They want to get and like make another 2x, 3x trade, right? Meaning that they're basically just leaving money on the table for the sake of making more money elsewhere, which is obviously not efficient for them. So the best way for them to do that would be to use this collateral, which is predetermined at this point, very high probability of resolving to $1, as a way to borrow against those shares and then reuse that capital into any other markets they wanted. So that was the initial reason why I started thinking in this direction as well, because I thought that anyone who'd be bonding would be interested in using that. And there were quite a lot of bonders, as it's called, on Polymarket at that time. And then you can also draw an analogy to how you do yield farming in crypto in general, because you can think of every bond as a yield generating asset, right? You just hold for some period of time in order to get extra 1-2% of that yield. And now, because you can use that initial asset to borrow against it, to enter into another bond, to borrow against that bond, and keep doing that, you're basically creating a leveraged yield generation machine, which is pretty cool and profitable for many traders.
Yeah, it sounds super slick. And the question that I already have, why do you think nobody before you got this idea, even though the Polymarket was already super big back in the time?
So first of all, Polymarket was quite a niche product when I got into it. It's actually very surprising for me to see how big Polymarket's getting, because I'm always used to Polymarket being this niche, nerdy topic people at the parties are discussing in the Bay, and now there are different traders talking about it on Twitter. But I think even back in the day, there were people who thought of this direction, and those were mainly the Polymarket people. There's this protocol called Polyland, which was built back in 2023 or so by Mike, who's a Polymarket employee. And they were just experimenting with it. They drafted a proof of concept within Polymarket, build out a simple smart contract that allowed you to borrow against the Polymarket token. And then they just abandoned the project. They wrote an article about that saying that it seems to be more complex than just a feature that we'd implement. And because we are prioritizing Polymarket as a standalone product, we would not go into that direction. Meaning that really they'd have to spin up a separate team managing a product like that, because there's much more to it than just letting people borrow and then getting that USDC in their Polymarket account. So that was the initial clue, but nobody has really even seen that article. I only found it by looking it up very precisely, that I was researching whether somebody has been trying borrowing against Polymarket positions, but I think it only got 200 views and 5 likes and something like that.
Yeah, but I already have this, question on the surface. Was it was the roadmap like that you got this idea, then started to do your research, then found this article? Or was it that you found this article, saw this green light from Polymarket team to actually build this sort of product and then started to execute? So which of these patterns did you choose?
Yeah, so it was the first one. I don't think I would have found this article by myself because it was so niche that nobody in the world has read it at that point of time.
And so, after the idea clicked, so basically you got the idea, you made the research, you validated it, which steps did you actually implement after getting this idea clicking in your mind? So how did you start the execution process?
Yeah, first of all, I started doing user interviews. I already knew a bunch of traders because I was in the community and I had some people I was talking to. Plus, I knew where they all hang out. They had a bunch of Discord servers where, most of volume on Polymarket is generated by only very few whales. And those whales are pretty approachable if you just talk to them, try to DM them and explain them that you are building something useful, which they can utilize to maximize their profits. And that's what I did, basically. Just started reaching out to those traders by all means necessary, from Discord to finding their telegrams to just DMing them wherever I could. And I got those first interviews lined up. I talked to the people, understood that there is actually demand for the product we're building. And I also saw what kind of strategies other people were using to get a bit of better sense of how Gondor can be incorporated in them. And at the same time, I also started doing the fundraise, because back then I was in college, and in order for me to get onto this full time, I had to raise some capital. So I think those were the two main priorities we had.
Okay. And when you started the interviews, who was the first guy or the lady whom you called, and what was their reaction? Your honest impression on that, and how did you feel back in the days? I'm really interested in this emotional part, because when you're the young founder and you're getting your idea validated, it's super crucial to get the feedback and then feel it through your entire body. And so how did you feel when it actually happened?
Sure, 100%. So I actually remember that one very well. There was this guy who I watched on YouTube for quite some time. His name at that time was Polymarket Trader. Pretty standard name to have.
Very straightforward. Not gonna lie.
Very explicit. He was just recording the breakdowns of the trades he made on Polymarket, but he was one of the very first people to ever do it in the space. Before him, there were nobody explaining their strategies on YouTube. And he was in fact profitable. So he was running this 10K to 100K challenge in order to just, break into the Polymarket trading. And I was a fan of him, although he only had 1,000 followers or something. And I DM'd him, said, hey, love your videos, have this product idea, let's chat. He responded, and we had a video call where I basically just pitched him the thing, and he said, I mean, probably, But for me personally, that would not work, mainly because of the types of markets he were trading. I think he eventually moved his strategies to the sports markets as well as mention markets. And both of those are the worst types of collateral you can imagine. Like, nobody wants to land against whoever Trump's going to say a word Illuminati in his next meeting, right? So because of his niche focus, he said that it's not for him, but he thinks that there's something in there, so you gotta go and talk to others and figure out the rest. So I did, and in fact, we found other different use cases for the idea.
Was there anyone who answered, no, your idea is bullshit and went straight to, negative phase? Or everyone who you interviewed were super positive about everything that you got on your mind?
Yeah, so of course there were people who were skeptical. I think many Polymarket traders, surprisingly, are actually not crypto native, and they just are against anything which is related to crypto, although they trade on Polymarket, just because of the perception crypto has outside of the CT. And when you reach out to them and you say to them, okay, man, you can deposit some shares into our magic protocol that's going to give you some USDC, and then you have to repay that USDC in order to get your collateral back, they're saying like, hold on, that's not what we'd like to do. Trust's probably the question here, right? And just general reputation of the product you're building. But we were in the very early days at that time. Like, nobody even knew what Gondor is, like the name and everything. Nowadays, it's much easier for us to get the first users on board because we've established ourselves as the team that's been building for quite some time, right? But back then, it was a problem. And then, obviously, there were all kind of other objections. I can't count all of them, but we made it through, so that's what matters.
That's super sick. And before, I wanted to touch the base on your routine and how you actually were dealing with the processes back in the days. But before that, you already mentioned a couple of times the name of the project. And what was, how did you come up to this name? Because you said that you love calling your projects on behalf of somebody. So how was Gordon actually brought to the table?
100%. So as some of our viewers may know, Gondor is the mythical kingdom in Lord of the Rings that stands between the Sauron and his orcs and the realm of the man, and protects and guides the way how, I guess, the Lord of the Rings narrative goes. And then one of the most epic battles is also happening around Minas Tirith, the kingdom and the fort, like the castle, essentially, like a very large. It's actually very beautiful in the movie, which's been defended by the main characters against the orcs, and I just love that narrative. Like, I think this is the kind of emotion I want people to feel when we touch the product. Something that's been standing as the last resort, the one that's been protected for centuries and is going to go on forever, basically protecting people against the volatility of Polymarket bets or whatever. I think it just fits nicely into the feeling we want to convey as a brand. And then also Gondor.com is not taken, so we have to close that gap.
Okay. And so, do you actually say that the lore of Gondor is calling Polymarket the... sorry, I just started to laugh. So, would you actually say that naming of Gondor as for the project calls the Polymarket itself... how is it called? Calls it the...
Sauron?
Yeah, the Sauron or the Mordor itself. Like,
so Polymarket...
Would you say that Polymarket is the Mordor in this context?
Polymarket is the realm of the man that we're protecting. And Mordor is the volatility we have on the markets that's trying to get people liquidated, which we're standing and protecting people from.
And who's Sauron then?
Well... the hand of the market, I don't know. Invisible hand.
And so let's react on how it looked at your personal life. So you were still a college student back in the day when you started with Gondor Finance. And how did you structure your life to deal with everything that you were facing? So I know that you took the leave of absence from university. So how you firstly got this thing in your mind that I need to get this leave of absence, and how your life was structured afterwards?
I think I only got a leave of absence after we started getting traction, to be completely fair. I first began working on Gondor around April last year, and semester was already winding down by that time, and I just had extra time on my hands to get on and start trying things out. At the same time, I was actually working at a company called Zerion, which is a crypto wallet, is supported by I don't know, like 500,000 users, a pretty large product. But I was interested in exploring down this direction, and I decided that I'd take a leave from there as well and just go all in with what I see currently as the opportunity on the market. And yeah, I've been just hustling, trying to talk to whoever was willing to talk to me, DMing all kind of random people, asking them to invest or to talk to me about the product, give me some ideas, some feedback, some user testimonials and stuff like that. And yeah, I think just brute forced it into existence.
All right, all right. That's actually super sick. And what was your schedule? Because what I'm trying to learn from you right now is how to properly structure your life when you changing your framework from just being a student and working for somebody onto becoming the real founder and running your startup yourself. So maybe just simple thing like what time did you wake up when you were actually in deep build process?
It's a good question. I don't even think that I remember that. It was like all blurred into the same long process of getting from point A to the point B. I think what gets things easier is when you have a single objective. Like at that point of time, I had a single objective of raising enough to be able to go all in and work full time on the product. And I had 3 months in the summer, June, July, and August until next semester starts, or I'd have to go back to college and continue my studies.
Okay.
So that was pretty much the thing I was most focused on. And then whatever I decided to do was, again, I guess the high ROI type of decision where you just look into the available paths for you to take and you're thinking which path would result in me getting funded with the highest likelihood, and you just take that path.
Okay, that's actually super sick. So you don't remember what time were you waking up? Because I had this trivial questions about how many hours did you sleep? What time did you wake up? Were you doing any sort of sports? Were you just fully focused? So maybe just your personal impression on this period of time. How were you building? When did you feel cooked or not? How was it?
Oh man, I think it was just me being extremely focused on one objective, and I did not really do anything else. Like we were moving to New York at the time as well, and my girlfriend was trying to get me out of the apartment or something, just yeah. Go out and explore the city, and I was just trying to make it work. So that's probably the thing I remember
Your answer was,
the most.
"Sorry, I'm busy with making a life fortune."
Yeah, we've raising a little bit of money. Yeah, but yeah, I just really I think it gets more it really depends on what kind of game you're playing. Like back then I had a pretty short-term game in a sense that I only have time until August, and I either make it or I don't, right? Nowadays, we're playing a much more longer term game. So because we have the resources, we can make decisions and plan into the next year or 2 years, which is actually something I'm still not used to so much because I've been optimizing for other like short-term decisions. But I think, yeah, at this point of time, it's very important for us to make the bet that turns out to be right in a year or two. At that point of time, I had to make a bet that has to play out in month or so, right?
In month, yeah, or a couple of weeks,
that was all I was focused on. I did not really do any other stuff apart from thinking about the product and understanding, how much time I have left and what I can do with it.
Okay, and let's cover a little bit of technical side, but let's not speak technical language. I want you to explain to me right now the liquidation process on Gondor, because basically you mentioned it in a couple of your interviews before, and I was just basically testifying this thing. And how does the liquidation process look? Because you were mentioning this quite complicated, and how you got which solution did you guys actually choose to make it possible?
100%. So as of right now, here's what happens when the liquidation occurs. So first of all, the liquidation is a moment when the price drops below a certain level and we have to sell your collateral in order to get the loan paid back, right? With crypto, because there's no way to force the borrower to return to your protocol, the only way how you can make sure that the loan's getting repaid is by having more collateral than the loan issued. So when you see that the collateral's drying up and you have to call it a day, you sell that collateral into the order book. But there is a problem with this approach because Polymarket's order books are actually off-chain, meaning that they are not hosted on the blockchain itself and rather are being run by Polymarket team by their own services. So if you start selling that collateral into Polymarket's order book, it would take you a little bit of time, a small delay until you have your order fulfilled, meaning that you'd likely occur more slippage, or like you'd basically sell your collateral at a cheaper price because the price is falling as you get the liquidation done. That's what triggered the price, the liquidation from the first place. So you have to be as quick as you can get. And what's interesting about prediction markets is that you have two different outcomes, right? Every market is binary. It's a yes and a no. And selling yes is an equivalent of buying no and vice versa because they're mirrored, right? So whenever yes goes up, no goes down, and whenever no goes up, yes goes down. So you're able to hedge essentially your existing collateral with the opposite side of the bet, meaning that now instead of taking the collateral from the on-chain into the off-chain Polymarket's order book, we'd rather just buy an opposite side of that collateral and hedge ourselves perfectly. So as soon as we executed the buy transaction, we do not care anymore how market moves because it's an equivalent of us selling the collateral. So where it helps us is the latency, which we're minimizing here.
Okay, and so maybe you can describe also in simple words, at which moment does the liquidation take place?
Sure, yeah, that is very simple. So initially, when you create a loan, you have this parameter called LTV, which is loan to value ratio. So basically, how much you're borrowing divided by how much you're providing as a collateral. And when you continue and with the loan and the collateral value moves up or down, if the collateral price declines, then the loan amount stays the same, but the denominator, the collateral value, declines, right? So that meaning that the overall LTV goes up from 50%, which is our maximum LTV as of right now, to like say 77%. That's our liquidation threshold. So just to give you a simple example, maybe you had $2,000 worth of collateral, and then you want to borrow, how much? Let me think a little bit. So you want to borrow $770 against that collateral, very precisely, but just for the simplicity of math. $2,000 worth of collateral, $770 worth of USDC.
Yep.
Then let's say your collateral declines in value and drops in half. So now that $2,000 turned into $1,000. Now your loan to value ratio, 770 divided by 1,000 is 77%. That's when we make a liquidation. So we still have some margin. We do not have to sell all the collateral. We only have to sell up to 770 in order to recoup our loan we initiated. But if needed, if there's more slippage or if market moves too fast against us, we can also use the remaining amount of the collateral. So we are protected by that buffer.
Okay, I see. And this is actually a very simple but very genius, I would say, decision. And did you come up to it by yourself, or was it somebody from the team that you already created around you?
Yeah, so as of right now, I think I'm making many of decisions like that myself, where obviously our engineers who are involved, but that specific one, I think I just knew very intuitively how Polymarket behaves, and the possibility of doing a liquidation in this way is only available on Polymarket, because for a regular asset like Bitcoin, you would not have a yes Bitcoin and no Bitcoin, which you can buy and sell. You only have one asset, so you have to do a liquidation differently. But on Polymarket, actually, every order book is mirrored. So basically, the liquidity which you supply to the yes side mirrors on the no side as the opposite direction for the trade. I won't go into details here, I guess, but it's interesting how those outcomes are being dependent on one another, and because of that, there is a possibility for new designs like that.
Okay. That's actually a very interesting part and how you guys were dealing with that. And on each journey, there is still a moment where when you have this thing on your mind that, all right, we are cooked. Something is going not into that direction that I actually wanted it to go to. So was there any moment when you had a thought that it's over, I'm quitting, or everything was smooth and no stops were actually were not appearing on your journey?
I think so far we had a pretty rapid climb. Usually products are spending much more time in the trenches, just grinding out first. But for us, I think the timing was very accurate because we started building out the protocol right before this prediction market super cycle began. So that helped. I think the most difficult times were obviously when we were launching the beta. Took a lot of iterations and final decisions, because it's one thing when you just prototype, and then the other thing when you put real money into it and you have to think through every possible exploit direction or even your own backend inefficiencies. And then also the fundraising, it's obviously intense. I don't think I am particularly so getting so demotivated by the fundraising, because I think that's what I've been doing my whole life. Like I've been participating in very competitive games with lots of rejections until you get to the prize, but it's still obviously pressuring you, but we made it, so it's all right.
Yeah, and coming to the fundraising part, maybe you can just describe how was it? Because you guys raised 2.5 mil, and we hear a lot of loud names in there. I don't know which ones I can actually call, which ones I cannot call. So I'm just giving you the mic here and asking you, how did you make it possible? Because all the startup founders here are sitting and trying to find a way to get their investments, and only very, very small percentage actually achieve the success in this thing. And so you guys, as the example of successful startup when it comes to fundraise, how did you make it?
I think it's the same fuck around and find out rule again. So especially,
I would make it the biggest quote on our today's podcast.
no,
Fuck
it
around
is,
and find out.
Because that's all you have, especially if you're not from like a country like United States. You do not have the information you need in order to make the right decisions. So with the fundraising process, there's a very typical playbook on how to properly fundraise, but you do not even know that this playbook even exists if you're not and a founder who's been through it before, right? So for us, the way how it started is I just began by cold emailing and cold texting whoever I knew who might have been able to write us a check. And that was initially an angel check. So we raised an angel round back in August, which was significantly smaller compared to the 2.5 we did. And that was just me purely brute forcing it again into the first capital we could have gotten from anybody whatsoever.
Do you remember the first yes that you got when it comes to fundraise, and how did you feel when it actually happened?
Of course I do. So I think for the angel round, that one was actually long awaiting because we spent so much trying to raise. I made pretty much every mistake you could possibly come up with. We started by asking for too little. We asked at a lower valuation when we were supposed to. We also did not create any FOMO, meaning that people could take as much time as they'd like in order to make a decision on us, and instead we should have pushed them and did this typical sales stuff where you're like, okay, guy, so we only have that opportunity available to you by end of week, or otherwise we're gonna go with others, right? That's a very common, I guess. It's actually mandatory for you as a founder. In order to close the raise, you have to create that FOMO around yourself. But we did not know any of that, so the whole race got stretched into months. And then I guess the first yes was kind of just awaiting for us there from one of the angels. I think it was not a wow moment for me, just because I've spent so much time putting effort into that, and we were not raising life-changing money, but then I guess when we started to raise the real round afterwards, that's when that moment actually hit. And as we started getting the offers, I think the first realization was that you can play much bigger in general. People are willing to support you when you are ambitious and when you are aiming at a higher target. So the problem with our initial angel round was that we were too risk averse again. We tried to play it safe and not raise too much because we were not yet sure about the whole thing working out. But the beautiful thing about startups is that people are willing to take that risk with you, and actually in some cases taking more risks is more attractive because it now becomes a more high stakes game with higher upside, which is what investors are looking for. So yeah, I think when we got that first real check and not the angel check, my thought was that we can do everything at scale. We can try and go all in with it with all the resources we have, instead of trying to play it safe and not making it to our full potential.
What was the size of a check, if it's not a secret? What was the first big money that you guys raised? And because, it's extremely interesting to learn about the feelings that you had inside of your body back in this moment.
Yeah, I don't think I can name the exact number, but it was 7 figures. So
it was 7 figures. All right, that's super cool. And so what did you do at first? So you have your startup funded, and right now you're able to do whatever the hell you want. So did you go run and buy Ferrari, or how people imagine it in their heads when they get their raise? What were the actions that you actually did?
Well, I don't think I did anything really. I started paying the team. That was cool because
Okay. Yeah,
the team's
when
been
you're getting
working.
paid in a startup, it's super
Yeah,
crucial moment.
yeah. Like the team's been working at a minimum wage or below the minimum wage before we got funded, meaning that yeah, I had to really make the incentives aligned for everybody, and that I think is a pretty cool feeling when you're able to get the people around you all in the same project you're building and not just yourself, because the people we've been working with, some of our engineers were like at different companies prior to that, and we were just helping out on the part-time basis, and then they left their companies in order to join Gondor, which is, yeah, I guess pretty cool feeling when somebody like bats it all in with you and is ready to walk that journey together.
Yeah, it's the moment when not only myself is crazy, but we all are crazy and cooking the
Yep.
same thing in here.
Yep.
Super cool moment. So you didn't buy a Ferrari, right?
Well, if I did, I don't think I'd be sitting here because even though the money is getting wired, there are some rules to it.
That's a wise word, very wise word. All right, and maybe to finalize the part with investment, what I wanted to ask you, was there anything that you really regret saying right now? So maybe that was a moment where you actually had a really, really cool potential, but you lost it because of a couple of words that you just said.
I don't think a couple of words really matter. I think the reason why somebody decides to invest in you or not is usually a mix of all kind of different factors. To be more specific, it's a mix of who you are and how you present yourself. First of all, people have to believe in you, right? And
Yeah, that's
they have
super
to be
fair.
confident that no matter if your specific direction right now is correct or not, you're going to figure it out, right?
Arseny, was there any of the investors who said no and then regretted it a lot?
100%, because our valuations before and after were quite different. So I think whoever got in the angel round actually made a pretty good decision. But I'm confident that whoever got into the pre-seed will actually love it even more as we go.
Oh, that's super cool. All right, let's circle back and talk a little bit about the philosophy of the project. And so I remember you wrote on your CT, many people in crypto forgot why they came here. And so my question to you was, why did you come to crypto space?
I think I really loved the idea of permissionless and decentralized tech from the first place. So I got into crypto more from the research side out of curiosity. I started by understanding how the basic concepts work, like AMMs, flash loans, different ways of how you do the actual cryptography and derive your public key from the private key, let's say, and stuff like that. So I really liked the, I guess, aura around the technology,
Okay.
which was very much aligned with, I don't know, the best books of Ayn Rand, let's say, and yourself being the decision maker of what you want to do with the money. It's a very individualistic ideology in a good way, where nobody really controls what belongs to you, right? And that, I think, is one of the coolest ideas, which started this whole CryptoPunk movement and the rest of it. But also, I think that with myself traveling around the world and being originally from a country where you can't even buy dollars properly because they are restricted by the central bank, I was very fascinated with this idea that I can just walk around across the borders with whatever amount I have in my wallet. And I found all of that very, I guess, romantic and rebellious in a good way
Yeah.
against the systems which are not designed in a way they should be. But then what I'm talking about in that tweet, we had all kind of different directions crypto went into which were not designed initially. And I think I tweeted that part during the meme coin bull run we had in 2024 or so. And meme coins probably the worst thing that happened to crypto, just because of how pointless all of that is and how it all makes, like, gets the worst out of the idea of permissionless currency, right? So
that's
eventually, blockchain on its own does not create value. It makes value transferable, where the value is being created off-chain by whether it's a US dollar, which is backing the stable coins, or whether it's, let's say, tokenized equities, which are then providing you a piece of ownership into the real company. And the purpose of blockchain is to let you own that without a centralized authority being able to steal it from you, right? And then meme coins or any other speculative assets are zero-sum Ponzi games where people are fighting against each other instead of fighting the system, which crypto was designed to beat. And also not creating any real value or not having any real value transferred, because a meme coin on its own is worthless as long as nobody wants to buy it, and the only value comes from the belief that somebody else would pay a higher price for the same thing that you did, right? Which is the exact definition of a Ponzi scheme. So yeah, I think that were the thoughts I had when I saw all of those coins popping, and I just really thought that the whole space is not moving in the right direction. And I think now with tools like Polymarket as well, we are getting somewhat corrected to more real use cases, but there's still a long way to go.
Oh, I fully agree with your statement that memes are one of the worst things that could possibly happen to the market. And we see that the attention is vanished right now, and the liquidity is vanished, and generally all the people who are waiting for alt season, they don't see it right now. Also because of the meme season that we were seeing before. And I love the fact that you mentioned that it's all about the attention. And so here I wanted to touch a little bit about the AttentionFi itself and how Polymarket changed this entire narrative. And so basically what Polymarket did, it transformed information into something tradable and made it concrete. And so do you feel that shift from the inside of the ecosystem when it comes to crypto, I would say, or you feel like, Polymarket and general prediction market narrative, something that stands behind or stands like side by side with crypto, but goes into very different direction?
I think prediction markets are definitely possible without crypto, and Kalshi is an obvious example of that, but they're much better when they're built on the crypto rails. Polymarket having more freedom for people to decide what to trade on and how to trade on is probably more aligned with having this decentralized source of truth, which was the initial narrative for prediction markets. And also the composability of those assets is pretty cool. And what we're doing with Gondor is only possible because of the way how those shares are traded permissionlessly. And that is also very important for getting real traders in the game. Because if you speak to any institutional traders, which we did, because I think just to get into the very depths of it, the real use case for prediction markets is institutions coming in. But for those institutions, it's important to have capital efficiency, and they cannot get it with just the regular yes or no buys. So this extra layer we're adding is very much what will facilitate that scale from the retail to the institutional trading. And this is not possible without crypto, or it would have to be executed in a very non-attractive manner, I'd say. It would be as ugly
This is
as
actually the
decentralized
way,
finance
like,
is.
I've been talking about it a lot on, every topic related to crypto, that most of crypto projects are bringing blockchain in just because they don't have the strong reason why they should have blockchain. They do not solve any problem. And here we have it vice versa, that you need blockchain in order to execute it all in a sexy way. And
Right.
so, for me personally, it's a very new thing, and I'm really happy that after all the meme shit that we had on this market, we finally have this breath of fresh air, and that the technology is being used because it is needed, not because we just want to put blockchain into our header. And so here, what I also wanted to ask you, that most of Web3 projects are coming up with their tokens, and none of the tokens that were launched recently are showing, good results. It all being, it all looks like a very big rug pull. So what do you think about token for your project? Do you plan a token? And what's your general opinion on that?
Every analyst on Wall Street knows that public markets are brutal. Like, no matter what kind of sentiment you've created when you first raised your private rounds with the VCs, the people who trade you on a public market will look at the numbers. They'll look at what you've actually delivered to date and not what you are promising to deliver as a founder who's pitching to the VCs. And the reasons why we see all of those ICOs collapsing is because the products initially raised at crazy valuations because of the promises, and then those promises have not yet been fulfilled. They might be at some point, but the public markets are not ready to take a bet on that, because public markets are much more short-sighted than the private markets. They react to pretty much any news or any minor change coming out in order to price the asset which is being traded as efficient as possible. And the problem with starting with tokens when you don't really have a real product is that you'll just get slaughtered by that market.
Yeah.
You're being judged based on what you've actually delivered and how sustainable your business is. And as long as your business is not yet sustainable and you need to burn through capital, you'd rather not be on a public market, because first of all, that's not what it's supposed to do. And then second, you have a better options by going down the private route, which would judge you more fairly, as you also want to price in that upside potential. And in our case, with Gondor, we are not planning to launch a token, at least not in the foreseeable future, as we are not yet a sustainable business, which is fine for every startup, because you'll have to burn a lot of cash in order to then get to the point where you're printing cash in billions, right? As it goes with the unicorns and everything. But it's the worst idea imaginable to have your company publicly traded while you're still figuring out what your company is about. Because
I love this statement.
People will price every mistake you make, and you'll have to wake up every day looking at the charts and panicking that you're not delivering enough shareholder value or whatever. Sometimes you have to make very brutal decisions when you run a company. You might want to fire a bunch of people. You might want to pivot into a different direction. Public markets react very negatively to all of that, because short term, that's not what's going to make you money. And if you look at the numbers, you might be down and losing money for the next year or two, and then eventually you'll work it out and you'll be extremely profitable.
And print billions, as you said.
As indeed. But you need that freedom to make those decisions, which private investors provide to you, because they know the part about exploration and understanding where the real value you can create actually lies. But the public markets are much less patient. And because of that, they just evaluate the project based on its current form. And as we saw with the ICOs of the recent projects, they're not yet being profitable or being any sustainable as a business. And because of that, they're being priced accurately to what they're worth as of right now. So that's why you have those incredible charts that are picking and then collapsing to zero.
Yeah, and then
which we do not want at Gondor. So we'll continue building the product first. And then if we do a token, that would be at a point when we're confident in the product and in what we've shipped so far instead of the promises of what we're going to ship tomorrow.
I love it. I love it because, basically it just proves again that you're not guys planning to make any sort of, quick extraction of liquidity and then run to do something else. It's more about, having for the foreseeable future. And so as far as I see the intention to build the product for a long period of time and that you are not planning any sort of, big quick scam and then do something else. And so here, what I think of is the entire prediction market narrative. So the market itself is very young, I would say. And a lot of people are actually 50-50 about its future. So do you think the prediction markets are something that we're gonna have in after 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? And if positive, why do you think so?
When you're creating a sophisticated trade, you usually have specific assumptions which you want to get exposure to. So for instance, maybe you're thinking that there is going to be a war happening in the Middle East and you buy oil as a proxy of that, expecting the oil to go up as the supply of oil dries up. However, any asset you look into is affected by hundreds of different events. And the oil might go down, although you were right about your assumption with the war in the Middle East. And what lots of analysts and traders do is that they basically craft their strategies in a manner to be exposed to the beliefs they have as accurately as you possibly can get. So you want to find a proxy that would be moving up when you're right and moving down when you're wrong on the opinion that you have. And prediction markets are a perfect tool for that because they separate those beliefs into individual questions instead of having them baked into a specific asset which you might be exposed to. And because of that, for instance, you're able to trade stocks more accurately. So whereas with markets on Polymarket on whether a company is going to underperform or outperform their earnings. And that is very helpful for traders because if you try to trade the stock based on its current market value and you want to say short the stock if it underperforms the earnings and long the stock if it overperforms, you'll quickly find out that market's not working as you'd expect. There was this very obvious case with Oracle stock that got pumped by 40%, making its founder the richest man on earth for a brief period of time. And the reason for that was that they underperformed their earnings and you'd expect the stock to collapse, but they got a deal with OpenAI that provides them like 200 billion worth of promised cash for their services. So the stock pumped on that on those news. Meaning that if you were an analyst who'd be shorting a stock because you expect the company to underperform, you'd get wiped out. But if you were to be on prediction markets and you'd be shorting a stock, you'd actually be in profit because you've isolated your belief and now you're able to accurately profit from that instead of being exposed to other stuff you might not even know about, like the deal with OpenAI. So the point here being that the PMF for prediction markets, the real scalable PMF on the institutional basis, is to isolate the beliefs people want to trade and then bake them into more sophisticated strategies. So maybe if you're, say, a long-term holder of an Oracle stock and then you're afraid that the Oracle stock might dump because of the potential underperformance of the earnings, you might short it on Polymarket in order to be hedged against the dump. And now you can create other different sophisticated strategies around that. So
just
that's
to
the reason
wrap
why
this
I'm bullish.
big idea up to a short sentence, how would you say it?
Isolating the beliefs you use for trading makes you more profitable and less exposed to volatility you do not want.
Okay, that's the quote. I love it. I love it. So you do think that Polymarket will still exist in a matter of 10, 15, 20 years?
I think so. I mean, those binary options type of contracts have been out there for centuries. As far as I remember, even back in 1900, people were trading different contracts on whether some agricultural events would happen. That was a way for farmers to hedge against different weather events. And those derivatives have existed in the past. They were just not baked in as nicely and packaged as conveniently as Polymarket does. Plus, there was no efficient market for them, and nobody was able to access them unless you have a bunch of licenses that permit you to trade those.
Yeah.
And now, because we do have those permissions, we're able to get more liquidity on them and make them more attractive for the other traders.
Super fair. And as far as we already touched the Polymarket topic, I think everyone will be interested in that. You got a grant from Polymarket's team. So tell us shortly about how you got this grant and how the Polymarket team is generally helping you. So is there any advisory involvement? Do people from Polymarket actually help you on daily basis or just, jumping on a calls with you? Tell us a little more about this entire process.
If you remember, I said about that Polyland project back in 2024. So Mike, the guy who built it, is still working at Polymarket, and he was pretty much the first person I spoke to about the idea of Gondor, because he was the one who built the proof of concept, and I reached out to him and said, hey, I think what you did is quite cool. I actually came up with the same idea myself, and I want to build it further. And he's been helping pretty much since that time. And then other teammates of Polymarket joined because they saw that we're getting traction. And eventually we just worked it into a more builder style relationship where we can request them a specific feature which is needed on the API side, or just tell them what we're planning to do next with the shares, because initially Polymarket was not designed to do stuff like borrowing against their positions. And they try to accommodate it. Obviously, they have a bunch of priorities because there's a lot going on in prediction market space right now. But yeah, they've been very helpful so far, and I think they are aiming to cultivate the builder ecosystem around them, which is very much a correct move, especially against their rival Kalshi, because Kalshi cannot afford stuff like that. They do not have the on-chain basis. They are very centralized, and that enables Polymarket to just double down in that direction of building like a third-party network of distributors, whether it's trading terminals or DeFi primitives or other stuff.
I think that, the existence of blockchain in Polymarket scheme is actually bringing all these crazy people from Web3 to build on Polymarket. I see right now CT is fulfilled with Polymarket. Every second Twitter influencer that I know is right now texting about Polymarket. Every freaking one is talking about Polymarket. It is because they basically just covered this entire community, and crypto community is huge. And so what I personally see as the biggest, pro of Polymarket when it comes to all prediction markets, that it allows people from crypto to build around it, and they give resources for that. And so the question to you as to the founder of the project that is built on top of Polymarket, if you were starting from scratch right now, is there any idea that it's still not covered, that is not executed yet? And what would be your first steps to build on Polymarket?
Well, first of all, I think if there was an idea worth building, I think we'd already be working on it internally.
Okay, guys, no free advices today. I'm sorry.
No, I can give an advice. I can tell you what not to build on Polymarket, which is,
okay,
I guess...
and that would be even better.
Yeah, and a pretty important consideration for a founder. First of all, no more trading terminals. I think I know at least 10 different teams who have been funded by the VCs to build out the best trading terminal for Polymarket and Kalshi. And they are already operating with millions of dollars in cash and running pretty quickly with their teams. So the space is very saturated. I mean, you can try, but you really have to have a very deep insight into why people need another trading terminal. Most of the terminals right now are not providing enough value for the real traders to switch, and it's difficult to come up with something new in there. Then another thing would be insider finders or different platforms for analyzing the data. That I think is a very difficult business to monetize, and because there've already been a bunch of those, they really do not have much moat. Like, as long as data is available and because it's on the blockchain, everybody could just look through it, package it into a nice database, and then reuse it in a specific product. Then there's not enough, I guess, room for creativity in there.
Okay.
So that's two. Then the third one would be different Telegram bots or bots embedded in another app. I don't think that is an entirely saturated space, and there might be some room in there, but you have to very carefully look through the existing products and understand what they already provide, because there have been countless trading terminals and the analytics platforms and the Telegram bots, which people have tried, and some are actively working on them, but the others have discontinued because of the saturation. So I'd say those three categories are out. And then the other things you can come up with would probably be something that adds to the Polymarket. So it should not be just a way to trade on Polymarket differently or to look through the data on Polymarket in a different manner. It should give more functionality, like different DeFi stuff. And then it should also live together in an ecosystem with the existing prediction markets, because so many people are trying to build out a new prediction market right now. And I've seen countless teams being funded for that stuff as well. But the problem is that competing with Polymarket and Kalshi realistically is extremely different. They're very well funded. They are already the most well-known brands, and they're coming up with most of the ideas. So, for instance, as far as I've heard, Polymarket is considering to open up permissionless market creation, which is gonna kill the rest of the permissionless market creation startups that I've seen plenty. So you'd rather want to add to the ecosystem using the Polymarket and Kalshi platforms as liquidity layers, as we're doing right now, and then creating extra functionality to the existing tokens, which is a little bit vague still, but I think I can give one example here, which would be not something I'd particularly recommend pursuing, but just to understand the direction I'm going into. There's this project called PMF Finance, which is currently building indexes on top of prediction market positions, meaning that they just bundle a bunch of different markets and they provide you exposure to a topic. So like, let's say maybe you're bullish on Elon, and this index just buys into Elon markets, assuming that he's going to succeed. So that SpaceX is going to hit a high market cap when going public, that Tesla is going to deliver on their promises with regards to robotics and stuff like that. And you can get exposed to a continuous index instead of having a binary outcome that resolves all the time and you have to reallocate your portfolio. So it's more of a passive investment into a trend rather than a binary share that you have to actively manage, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if projects like that actually have the PMF, because that still has to be validated. But I think that this kind of extra functionality, something new for people to try and trade new exposure to different composable primitives, is what you can still build, and not so many teams have attempted to do so.
All right. That's, as wise answer as I could possibly imagine. So I don't even know what to add here. It's just, statement, quote full stop. And going forward with the Polymarket team, I think everyone who's watching this podcast right now is super interested in how does the interaction with the team looks. Do you interact with Shane himself? And maybe you can just generally give us some insights of what Polymarket team is, who they are as people. Are they fun to talk, or are they, geeks and not cool to talk to? And, just generally your impression on Polymarket team.
Well, yeah, I can tell a little bit about that. So first of all, no, I do not talk to Shane. I think he's very overwhelmed with all the other things going on with Polymarket right now. The guy is obviously busy. He recently became a billionaire, so congrats to him. He has some stuff
Shane,
to do.
Congratulations.
I'm pretty sure. And with regards to the rest of the team, I think they're very focused on some objectives we do not yet see. And they have lots of stuff under their sleeves, as it feels, because they talk to so many people, which the rest of the market hasn't looked into quite yet. So for instance, all the TradFi, right? The reason why they raised $2 billion from New York Stock Exchange is because they want to get access to the Wall Street. They want those large firms to trade on Polymarket. And I think the conversations they're having with those firms are extremely interesting and probably have lots of insight, which the rest of us have not been really thinking about quite yet. So yeah, I see the guys are very focused. I think they have a bunch of priorities and different directions they can go into, but they have to cut them off and focus on, again, the most valuable things they can pursue. And yeah, as far as I can see, that's what they're mainly up to.
Okay, I see it. And what is your perspective when it comes to what Polymarket could possibly plan? Do you have any insider stuff that you can share with us? So you were saying that they are talking to people who most of the people do not have access to, and they are already planning something on top, something that we still haven't been talking about yet. And what is this thing? What do you generally think will be the next step for entire prediction market culture?
I think Polymarket's trying to maximize the amount of liquidity provided. The recent feature they just shipped is ability to support market with liquidity rewards by yourself. So if you're a trader who wants to have more liquidity on a specific market, you can just pay people to market make for you, which is pretty cool. And I also think only possible on chain. And then apart from that, it looks like they're getting more firms involved, in a sense that as far as I know, Jump Trading is now market making on Polymarket. And then Susquehanna has been market making on Kalshi for quite a while. And there are all kind of other different firms who've been doing trading of similar assets. So maybe like different crypto markets or sports markets for a while with TradFi. And now they see that there's a new market on Polymarket for that. And they're trying to jump on that opportunity as well. And I think in the next foreseeable future, I expect Polymarket to bring in many more institutional stakeholders, and I think that's another niche which nobody is really building for. I have not seen any institution focused product on Polymarket apart from ourselves, mainly because we are targeting institutions with the capital efficiency problem. But yeah, I think that would be the most exciting part. And eventually you want to have institutions trading those markets because the retail liquidity is helpful, but it's not enough to really scale 100x.
Okay, and so touching this future of Polymarket once again, I remember your opinion on tokens in general and how the crypto market looks from this perspective. And when it comes to Polymarket, there are rumors that Poly token is pre-approved internally. And so do you believe in these rumors, and do you really think that Polymarket will release their own token? And why? My biggest question is why and what for?
I think it's kind of obvious at that point that they are going to do a token and they're also going to do an airdrop. It's been confirmed by a few team members several times publicly. So yeah, that's what I can share. I also think it's going to be quite soon, and it would probably be together with their US expansion or some other features they might ship. It's a good question why they need a token specifically. I think they might add some functionality to it. So for instance, maybe they try to migrate off the UMA protocol, which is the way they use for resolutions. And UMA protocol has not been efficient. The market cap of UMA token they use is very little, meaning that the resolution itself can be manipulated if the underlying market scales too much. And that has already happened several times. So maybe they want to use the Poly token for staking and doing the Oracle verifications.
Okay.
Apart from that, I think, yeah, it depends. It really depends on what kind of functionality they're going to add to it. Obviously, it would be, in their case, very similar to going public because they've already raised several rounds. They are not yet profitable, but they can get profitable at any point of time by switching the fees on, right? And I think in Polymarket scenario, it actually makes sense to launch a token. In the same sense, it makes sense to go public, right? So they can pick one of the two routes, or I have seen that somebody claimed that they might pick both. So they're going to do a token and a public launch, public offering. That would probably be for separate projects. So Polymarket Global would be token-based and Polymarket US would be stock-based, right?
Stock-based, yeah.
Which is an interesting direction to take. I think, yeah, that would be just another step for them as a company. So they want to maybe raise more during that public sale. Maybe they just want to provide opportunities for the initial team and investors to exit. But I would not call it like exit liquidity because Polymarket is like a sustainable business at this point,
Yeah,
right?
this is the most important thing.
Yeah, so because you do have the asset underneath it, which is gonna be generating revenue and it's gonna be growing over time and capturing the value, I wouldn't call it a rug pull or like an extraction event. So it's actually ability for early team members to get rewarded and for new people who want to get exposure to Polymarket to have it. So yeah, I think that's the overall thoughts.
All right, that's a very cool thing that you just mentioned, and I love the explanation of why the token is needed and your general opinion on that. And what I wanted to hear from you is about your project. So what do you guys plan in the upcoming future? Maybe some super interesting insights, how you want to extend your coverage on CT, let's say, how you want to go with your marketing, how you want to make more users to be interested in your platform, and what are your plans in general?
There's a lot of stuff we're cooking right now. I think most importantly, we are working on the very first project we've launched, the beta version of Gondor. And at the same time, we're getting ready to migrate to the V1 of Gondor, which is going to be coming out later in 2026. The V1 most important improvement mainly is cross-margining, so the ability to borrow against several of your positions at once, and that provides you with better terms, higher LTVs, lower interest rates, which is what makes the whole concept possible and logically correct, because underwriting individual positions is still kind of risky and passes a lot of directional risk to the lender. So that is one of the most important parts on the product side. And then I guess more short term, we'll be rolling out a few new announcements on Twitter very soon, including like new chapters for the users who'll be getting onboarded and some extra perks for the people who would want to engage and try the protocol, as well as also like different experiments with this composability aspect. So trying different markets and seeing how they perform with the borrowing condition added to them and stuff like that. So yeah, many more things to come, and soon enough you'll see us all over the timeline.
Sounds sick. And to come up with some final words on this podcast, because we're already running out of time. And I could talk hours and hours to you, Arseny, not gonna lie, but we need to somehow finish it today. What I wanted to ask you, imagine you are 18 years old boy sitting somewhere in the ass of this world. I wouldn't call the exact place, but somewhere far, far, far in some small city with no good surrounding, with no founders around you, with no potential, with nothing. What will be your steps to become somebody in this life? What would you recommend to these people?
I guess you already know what I'm gonna answer. First of all, fuck around. Second of all,
Yes,
find
sir.
out. That's the only way, right? Like, you don't know yet what you do not know. So you have to start with something. You don't have to know what's going to happen exactly and in what order, but you have to understand what is the best option for you to take at the moment. Maybe it is to move to a different city. Maybe it is to try and get into a university. Maybe it is to try and get a role in an industry you want to work in, or directions like that. And you might not have the specific understanding for how exactly things are going to play out, but as the classical Steve Jobs' graduation speech goes, the dots will be connected eventually.
Yes,
and the things that you went through are all gonna get into the same picture, and you'll be able to use what you've learned in the past in order to get where you want. But in order for you to understand what you even want from the first place, you have to have more information, which you're gradually gathering by exploring the world and making the best decision in your current situation one at a time.
I think there could be no better ending that you just said. And I think it was one of the most insightful podcasts that I've ever recorded. It's super cool to feel your energy, to learn about your journey, and to get some insights for you. And what I actually wanted to say, Arseny, thank you so much for being here with me today. Unfortunately, not sitting in the same room, but at least having this feel of the same room. And maybe some final words before we finish the podcast.
Well, first of all, if some of you who are watching right now wanna find out, then we are currently hiring. So we are looking for engineers, quants, and all kind of other roles to join Gondor. And if you wanna shoot your shot, you should know where my DMs are. And then second of all, yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do by just brute forcing them into existence. Nobody really knows the right answers, and the only way how to get to the right answers is to try and fail and try over again. And I think in general, our current society is very much rewarding the people who are willing to take those risks compared to the earlier stages when people like founders today really had possibility of like dying on the streets or whatever. But as of right now, the risk reward ratio is in your favor. So go out and try the crazy things you have not yet, and the dots will be connected.
Super cool. Guys, follow myself on X, follow PredictTime on X, follow Arseny on X and everywhere else. Track Gondor. Of course, apply if you have the capacity and ability to do so. And remember what we just learned on our today's podcast, that fuck around and you will find out. Thank you so much. My name is Dimitri. I had Arseny here on my podcast here today, and see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much. Cheers.